Welcome to the Conscious Radio Network's YouTube channel. Become enlightened, have fun, and tell all your friends and family to share with everyone they know. You can find us on Facebook and stay up to date on our Facebook group, or find us on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. Our podcasts can be found on Libsyn, iHeart, Spotify, Google Podcast, and more. Most of all, remember to go to our official website at consciousradionetwork.com for podcasts, hosts, future shows, and scheduling. We also want to welcome our international audience. Don't stop now. Enjoy the community. Subscribe today.
This is the Conscious Radio Network.
Good morning, afternoon, or evening, wherever you might be on the spaceship we call Earth. Welcome to Conscious Radio Network's YouTube, or it is a channel, weekly podcast series of The Seance. I'm your host, Reverend Dr. Paul Meckes. If this is your first time tuning in, please click subscribe, like, share, comment. Also, don't forget to follow us wherever you listen to your podcasts. Death's Pale Flag. Today, joining us was the founding chief of neurosurgery and neurosurgery residency program director at the Carilion Clinic at the Virginia Tech Carilion School of Medicine until retiring from clinical neurosurgery in 2019. He remains a professor at the Virginia Tech School of Neuroscience and the Virginia Tech Carilion School of Medicine. He has studied and lectured widely on burnout and resilience. He has written 3 related nonfiction books and has recently released his first novel, a medical psychological thriller and with paranormal events or elements, entitled Death's Pale Flag. Let's welcome to the seance, Gary Simonds. That was a lot of people. Whoa.
I have to say, I haven't had an applause like that before, so I'm much gratified. Thank you so much for having me.
You are very, very welcome and humbled to have you with us. I am intrigued, especially with this book and the title. Let's go back in time a little bit with your neurosurgery practice. That's a calling to have, to be in that profession. So tell us a little bit of backstory on this part of your life.
Sure. Well, yeah, a calling could be one way to look at it. Maybe falling through a trap door would be another. So when I was in medical school, I had multiple aspirations, as a lot of medical students do. You kind of go through various incantations of what you're going to become. So I started off in family practice and went through a whole bunch of other different potential specialties and had finally settled on being a cardiothoracic surgeon and had my training all set up, a residency program all set up. And the last month of medical school, I saw my first brain operation. I said, oh my God, I have got to do that. I had no idea what I was getting myself into, and it was a lot. People describe coming on a neurosurgery services like stepping onto a moving train. I would say it was like a bullet train, but it very much actually worked out for me because I can't imagine doing anything else. It was a great joy on so many levels, and so there I was, neck deep or beyond in neurosurgery for several decades.
Yeah. Now, you've written other novels. Many years of writing this recent novel, Death's Pale Flag, is a fiction novel. But you've written many other nonfiction novels. Can you tell us about some of the nonfiction that you have written?
Yeah, the nonfiction books are all surrounding the concept or the situation of burnout and trying to come to grips with how pervasive burnout is in healthcare. And I've worked on it with a close friend who is kind of a world expert on physician burnout, a psychologist, Wayne Sotil. But we put these books together hoping to help people who are burning out in healthcare find a way to build their resilience, build their personal wellness. And it started out originally as a book for neurosurgeons, and people said to us, well, it's more than neurosurgeons who burn out, in medicine. So the second book was written for all physicians. And then people said, well, it's more than physicians who burn out in healthcare. So we wrote the third book for all people in healthcare. And then people started saying, well, it's not just healthcare where people burn out. We said, oh, that's probably as far as we're going to
Yeah. And I bet this was very popular, especially during a couple years ago, during COVID.
Yeah, I kind of wish it was more popular than it was in terms of the books. Not that we were ever going to make anything financial out of the books, but it was a time of great need. And actually, I almost wonder if the need is even worse afterwards. I think during the worst parts of the pandemic, people just kind of girded their loins and waded in and did when it kind of chilled out, then I think a lot of people were going, okay, well, shouldn't things be better now? Shouldn't our work environments be better? Shouldn't we be happier? And so it was almost like an aftershock where I think we're maybe seeing even more burnout now than actually during the pandemic proper.
Yeah. Now let's dig into this new novel. What started you with? How did this start?
Well, throughout my career, I always worked in what are called level 1 trauma centers, which are just very busy places. If you're ever near one of these hospitals, you know it by the ones where all the helicopters are flying in all the time, and they're literally coming in all the time. And if you think about it, each helicopter is bringing some disaster in somebody's life. They're literally, their lives and their families' lives are being turned upside down. And neurosurgery in these settings is very high level, and it's fraught with a lot of crazy stuff. I mean, you're just seeing wild and crazy and sad and devastating things, tragic things all the time. And I through the years always thought it would be good for people to kind of understand what's going on back behind the doors, back behind the operating doors. What's going on? Why is it going on? Kind of the bravery of the patients, the bravery, and I always call it the bravery and grace of all the patients and their families. I'm forever awed at just how people are able to get through these horrible times and not be screaming at the top of their lungs, from the top of the hospital and throwing things. I always picture myself as, throwing chairs and breaking windows and stuff, but just tremendous bravery and gravery. And it was grace and bravery. And it was always so inspiring. And so I always wanted somehow to get that out. I always wanted to get out also just how fragile life is. I always got to see it, unfortunately, on the flip side, where we tend to lead our lives and we're happy and playful and go through our lives somewhat oblivious to just how close to the edge we all are. But when you're there in the hospital, you're seeing the other side where it just feels like everybody is coming in with their bodies destroyed, with their brains destroyed. And I've always wanted to get the word out that how fragile it all is and how we should be appreciating it more and appreciating each other more and loving each other more and that sort of thing. So that was always bubbling underneath, and I'd jot down experiences and thoughts and stuff. And I thought I would write this kind of, I don't know, expose is the wrong term, just a good description of it all. But a couple of good books came along through the years that did that in a nonfiction way. And I thought they did a pretty good job, although it almost felt like a textbook. And I thought, well, geez, it might be far more interesting and immersive for people if I did it through some sort of fiction, where hopefully I put the people who are reading right into the operating room, maybe holding the scalpel themselves, maybe seeing the brain bleeding over, over the drapes and onto their shoes themselves, and having to figure out what the heck am I going to do here. So I thought it might be, it might actually catch readers even more if I put it into a fictional setting. So that's how that came about.
Yeah, it's I've got a really, really good imagination, and I've been to a hospital many times, myself having to be in one on emergency. Luckily, I was never airlifted, but I've had some family members that have been airlifted, and I can relate. I can relate the emotions that are going through the families in moments and tragedies like this. And for people to see that other side and to experience a little bit of that other side, to see, because in the work that you have done, you're on your feet. It's like on call immediately. We got eagles coming in, and as soon as that sucker lands, that gurney comes in, and I'm assuming you're getting a heads up of what you need, what's going on, blah, 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 and getting everything prepped. And then immediately, lack of a better word, cutting in, digging in, and trying to find out what the issue is immediately before you lose them.
That definitely happens all too often. There would be nights. It always seems to be at night. I know it happened during the day, but in fact, I studied at one point, something like 70% of our emergency consultations came in between midnight and 6 in the morning. And so there'd be nights where you would see 20 emergency consultations, just one after another, be talking to one devastated family after another, several surgeries, that sort of thing. So it could be truly crazy, nonstop, just as you're describing. And, you almost just become reactive. Okay, I dive into this one, then I got to move into that one. And you're getting called when you're in the middle of somebody's brain about another disaster coming in and that sort of thing.
Yeah. And the thing is, too, as far as your support, how much support do you get? Are there times where you have, other people in your profession, other neurosurgeons that are kind of doing the same thing, or unfortunately being in that instance, you're the only one in the hospital?
Yeah, you are basically the only one. Now, we had a residency program, a training program, so we always had a resident who is on call as well. I say as well, they're the front line, so they get the first calls, and then they call us when we need to be coming in. But it's usually just two of you. Now, there are backups, so if you truly had a mass casualty situation, you would have backups. But usually it's you and one other person as the neurosurgery team. Now, for example, if a bad car accident comes in, there's a whole team of trauma docs and ER docs and trauma PAs and residents. And it, can look like a 3-ring circus, but it really is a symphony on what's getting done. The patient's getting all these things done for them almost instantaneously. And we roll then over right next door into the CAT scanners and are looking at the scans all together and making decisions on what to do.
Yeah, it's definitely a very critical team that I can imagine.
Oh yeah, no, and then of course you have the nurses who are really the backbone of it all. So the nurses are making sure everything gets done and people are going in the right place, and all the care that needs to be done for the patients is being done. So there very much is a team there, but you and your resident are the only neurosurgeons there for sure.
Yeah. Now, the book, I haven't read it yet, but to give a little bit of a hint, I heard there are some paranormal elements involved in this book.
Yes, sir.
So without giving too much juicy details, can you give some suspenseful captions that might get some of our audience up and out to the bookstore?
Well, sure. And so, when I decided to go to fiction, I had to figure out what's going to be the fictional components, because there's going to be a lot of real life stuff in there. And the book is full of real life in hospital scenarios, in operating room scenarios. I tried to make it as realistic as possible. And I don't think I strayed into hyperbole at all, but I had to have some sort of fictional story as well. And originally it was going to be, the surgeon was at Walter Reed, and he was taking care of Supreme Court justices who were going down, and figured out that somebody was poisoning them with a poison that created aneurysms. And then the FBI got involved. And of course, there was a beautiful blonde FBI agent, but it just all got out of control. And then I started thinking about just how exposed we are to death. I think, the general public anymore, just we kind of keep death at arm's length. We keep people shielded from death quite a bit. Mm-hmm. But boy, in my world, it's just a daily activity that you are seeing people dying and dead, and you're trying to save people, obviously. And so I thought about, if there is a supernatural world, if there are ghosts about, maybe they would be attracted to people who are right there, always kind of at the dividing line, or I described it in the book as a bridge between life and death. And certainly as a brain surgeon, I kind of felt like I was on that bridge all the time, saying goodbye to a lot of people and trying to pull people back. And maybe, if there were a spirit world, a ghost, that they would be seeing, me as somebody familiar and reaching out to me in one way or the other. So in the book, the main protagonist is, of course, a brain surgeon, and he's overworked, overtaxed, besought by a lot of tragedy around him, certainly burned out. And then he begins to see things that are kind of mysterious. At first, he thinks they're hallucinations, and he eventually convinces himself that they're ghosts. Mm-hmm. And then the question is, why are they around? What are they trying to do? If they are ghosts, of course, the reader has to figure out, are these ghosts, or is he losing it? And if he's losing it, what's going to happen? Or if they're ghosts, what's going to happen? And the other thing I wanted the reader to really think about is, what's actually more scary here, the ghosts, the supernatural world, or the very natural world of a modern American medical center?
Yeah. I can picture that as being a movie too. You could definitely make that into a film.
Yeah, I'm waiting for Brad Pitt to call me and play the neurosurgeon.
Yeah. And then you got some twists in there to where, some of the spirits or ghosts are trying to he's getting like signs and symbols and stuff like that. And he's trying, but they're weird. He doesn't understand them until synchronicity kicks in, and he's starting to see these other things happening. And then he starts doing research and finds something out about something that happened in the past, or give you some ideas.
No, I mean, that's very much like what goes on. And he starts to research these things that he's seeing and convinces himself that these were once living people, and that they potentially had connections to the town that he's living in. And so he very much convinces himself that these are ghosts. Of course, this puts a lot of strain on his marriage, which is already strained because he's a brain surgeon. Yeah. And he's never home. And there is hopefully little components of this that we can learn things from. I mean, he's not very good on the self-help side of all this. He's pretty darn stubborn about, taking care of himself, and maybe gets a little too much into the hero side of this, that he needs to be the hero and never tends to himself, and kind of sinks deeper and deeper.
Yeah. What are your beliefs on ghosts? Do you believe in supernatural and spirits and ghosts?
It's an interesting thing. I am very interested in the interplay, I guess, between science and the supernatural, or science and religion, or science and spirituality. I think I'm going to give you a long answer to a short question, so forgive me.
No
But
worries.
I'm in the world of neuroscience, and neuroscience. There's a lot of people in neuroscience who figure everything is explainable by this organ, by our brains and all that the brains can generate. And so everything that we think is an experience may be an experience outside of the realms of the natural, that i.e. are the supernatural, or our spiritual or religious, is just a contrivance of this machinery that's up in our heads. And I get it, and it's amazing what the brain can do and generate and all that sort of thing. But I I I keep feeling like there's a little bit of hubris there. There's where we are convinced that, oh yeah, science has got everything explained. Science has got everything figured out, and it hasn't, and we won't. There are things that potentially are going on out there that we'll never prove or disprove. So just because something can't be definitively shown and measured as we do in science doesn't necessarily mean that it's not out there. So to answer your question a little bit more directly, I don't know. I don't know the answer. I am open to it. So somebody on a discussion I had a while back, I came up with the best description for me, at least, and that is that I would call myself a optimistic agnostic,
Yeah.
where I just don't know, but I'm kind of optimistic. I kind of think somewhere out there's more than we think is going on, because because of our existence, and B, because I know our brains are very limited in what it can actually take in and process. So, it almost stands to reason that there's more going out there than what we can actually capture.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, as a neuroscientist, what are your views on consciousness? Do you think it's local or non-local?
Yeah, I mean, there's the $60 million question. If I can get that
Yep.
one answered, I can retire right now. But yeah, I I am an optimistic agnostic, where you know I, there is obviously a physiological side. I've seen plenty of people's consciousness extinguished because of their brain injuries or brain diseases, and yet there's something in me that screams that I'm more than just those neurons firing. And so, yeah, I want to believe, and probably somewhere deep down inside, if you pin me down, and it tortured me until I told you my deepest beliefs, I have to believe that there's more than just the physiology. So yeah, I want to believe that I have a consciousness outside of this. How it interplays, I don't have the equipment to figure out, and I'm not sure I ever will. And I kind of I went into college planning to go into the ministry, and kind of got diverted into biochemistry and the pre-medical world and medical world. But there's still a part of me there that wants to believe there's a lot more going on out there, and nobody has convinced me that it hasn't. So I keep an open mind.
Yeah. And we have to. We can't be on a straight and narrow, because we would lose out on so many opportunities in life.
Yeah, I kind of think so. And, to go back to your original question on this, though, I have to tell you, too, that I would love to see a ghost. I would love to experience ghosts. It would be great. You think, though, even on the spiritual side of that, if you truly could see ghosts, what would that tell you about life after death? I mean, it would change everything, right? It would change all our perceptions of everything. But I will tell you, my mother and my grandmother, who I grew up with, they were both Scottish, and they firmly believed in ghosts, and both had experiences of their own with what they believed to be ghosts. So I was certainly surrounded by the lore of it, and therefore it became much easier to incorporate into the book.
Yeah. Yeah. Have you ever experienced anything that, like, in the operating room when someone passed, any weird vibes or any unusual energies and stuff like that, or a shift in the atmosphere or something like that when you know that the patient has now had passed?
Honestly, no. Luckily, very few patients have died on quote, on the table on
Mhm.
us. It usually occurs in a little bit more of a controlled fashion up in an ICU somewhere, or or they come in dead, unfortunately,
Yeah.
into the trauma base. But I, the, our probably our radar is really bad at those moments because we are
Oh, yeah, yeah.
fighting, with every last ounce to stop that from happening. And it's pretty devastating. So you're not even thinking. I doubt I would notice somebody lighting my leg on fire. It
Yeah.
just, you're so drilled in on what's going on.
Yeah, there's way too much stuff going on. Yelling, shouting, beeping and buzzing
Yep.
and things knocking against the wall and ground. Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah,
and everybody's adrenaline is just going crazy.
it's off the
Mm.
scales, for sure. So yeah, I wish I could say I experienced that. I will give you an example, though. It's kind of, again, it goes back to what we were just talking about. But there's been a spate of articles recently about patients with EEGs running when they die, and they've noticed in several patients. I don't know. It's just a handful, maybe 6, 10. I don't know what the numbers were, where there was a sudden burst of high level activity in the brain just at the time of death. And it's an activity that's very reminiscent of our brain when we're really awake and really paying attention to something. So, in these neuroscience articles, they would always say something like, see, this explains it all. This explains all this near death hocus pocus that we hear about, of people seeing a white light in a tunnel and their relatives waving them on and stuff
Yeah.
like that. You see, we can explain it. Science can explain it. It's all got to do with physiology. And I'm reading this and I'm saying, wait a minute, this doesn't explain anything. It's just some electrical activity in the brain. It doesn't disprove a single thing. But that's kind of the way it's just. It's almost a faith in and of itself. I always say that, that scientific atheists, at least, they're just kind of worshiping another faith. Faith is believing in stuff you can't prove. So, to me, it's just another religion in some ways. Oh yeah, we'll solve everything with science. I'm much less convinced.
Do you have an explanation of that light at the end of the tunnel, that seeing of light that most near-death experiences or experiencers face during that transition?
Well, it's a bunch of high level electrical activity in the brain. No, I don't know. I kind of wish it's true. I mean, I wish there was an immediate introduction into another state of being. And I mean, if there is another state of being, you got to get there somehow. So,
Yeah.
it certainly could be, but, I'm not going to profess or pretend that I can explain it all, or am going to tell you, the veracity of it all. It's just, you certainly hear about it a lot.
Hmm. Yeah. Do you see any of your peers, any of the other neuroscience or medical community parts of it that might be trying to explain that and kind of you know kind of try to explain what that is and involved with the body, the physiology of the body and the brain and synapse?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's what they were trying to explain with these EEG study that they did. Again, it was just a handful of patients, and even if it was 1,000 patients, I'm not quite sure I know what it means. And I mean, you get all kind. I mean, you get all kinds. There are certainly neurosurgeons and neuroscientists and physicians in general who are very devoutly religious, so they're going to have their own interpretations. I think there's probably more people like me than let on that, aren't sure and would like to believe that there are certain things going on there beyond the physiological. I almost think there are some people who are so dismissive of anything but the physiological. I think some of those people are actually in the burned out category. They've reached that point of just seeing so much nasty stuff that they just kind of become nihilistic and there's nothing. So I think there's a broad spectrum. There's also I've seen a lot recently of people who want to kind of take it into ultra physics and tell you that energy can never be destroyed, and there's clearly energy going on in all of us, so we just reach a different state of energy, but I have no idea what that means and how that would be experienced. So but I do hear that a lot sometimes amongst my ilk.
Yeah, getting really deep into the quantum physics, quantum mechanics, the metaphysical. Yeah.
But it's funny, whenever I hear, the high level physicists or particularly astrophysicists talking, I'm kind of going, wow, you're talking about parallel universes, and there's infinite number of parallel universes, and they differ just by one subatomic particle. And I hear all this, and I'm kind of going, this is just another faith. I mean, you're never going to prove this, so you're just believing in something else. So again, I find it interesting, but I find it fascinating because I think we're all coming to grips with this great mystery of life, right? I mean, this is an unbelievable mystery. I think it's interesting and exciting to contemplate, but I'm never going to profess I've got it figured out.
Yeah. It's same here. It's like, it's great stuff to study. It's great stuff to, kind of just let wander in your brain and put stuff together. But at the same time, as a neuroscience, you've got more important things to do, like save people's lives instead of worrying about what's going to happen after.
Yeah, I mean, we ultimately have to be pragmatists, and so I mean, there are many a time that family members wanted us to pray along with them for, the sake of their loved ones, and we certainly would do that. We're going to do whatever we can to, help people and bring them back if we can.
Yeah. Now, share with the audience how people can find you. We do have your website scrolling on the bottom, and we'll also have it in the show comments or the descriptions and stuff. But let everybody know where they can find you.
Well, great. Yeah, that is my website, just my name.com, GaryRSimonds.com for sure. And to be honest with you, part of the reason why I'm doing this, part of the reason why I even built the website, well, first of all, they tell you, hey, you have to when you're putting these books out. But second of all, for writing the book is stuff like what we're talking about today, I find just infinitely interesting. And it's all the more interesting when you hear it from other people, what their take on it is. And it's always, you're always learning new things when you talk to other people and hear their views on it. So one of the reasons why it's there's real easy ways to get a hold of me through that website. There's ways to contact me directly, has my direct email on it and all. And if people ever want to discuss these things, I love it, discuss it individually or discuss it with a group. That's the type of stuff that I really enjoy. And, I am no expert on a lot of this stuff. I can tell you some physiology and I can tell you a little bit about, how it goes down inside a hospital, but we're all learning. We all find out, interesting and new things from each other. It's funny. I was just talking to people the other day. It was my son was the one who started it, but it's an example of how you learn things all the time. We were talking about inner voice, inner dialogue. Do you have an inner dialogue?
You mean like kind of like speaking to yourself, or you're hearing that voice within your head, or
that something's going on in there talking to you and telling you things or directing your attention to something. Is your inner dialogue nice, or is it critical?
Most of it seems to be fairly nice. It's kind of like questioning myself. Why did you do that? Why did you do this? Why do you do that? And, like, or like kind of going, wait, stop. No, maybe
And
do this.
is it a voice? I mean, would
It,
you say it's a voice? And if it's a voice, is it your own voice?
I wouldn't say, it's a voice because it's not like I hear it. It's like I feel it,
Wow.
sort of. It's
So,
really hard to explain. And that's
yeah.
awesome that you bring that up because I've never had anybody ask me that before.
Well, this came up, and then, I sampled some other friends on it the other day. And I think we all assume that it works the same way for everybody else. So I have a voice. It's very much a voice. It's not, you're more like my son and my wife who said, no, it's not truly a voice. It's you feel the words or think the way, but I
Yeah.
hear a voice, sometimes in my own voice, sometimes some neutral voice. Mine's very critical. Then you have, more like yours. And you have some that are very nice, some that are critical, some that are nasty. Then my son was saying his partner, she doesn't really hear a voice or think in terms of words. She sees pictures.
Huh.
So pictures light up in her brain, and kind of the world is depicted, and ideas and suggestions are depicted more in a visual sense. And I'm like, really? And then he pointed out, and he sent me to a couple articles that quite a few people have none of this, have no voice, have no inner dialogue, no inner pictures. It's not there. And I'm thinking, how
Huh.
in the world is that possible? Mine goes all the time. It's yabbering away all the time.
Yeah.
So that's what I mean, though. The more you can kind of talk about this sort of stuff, I think you learn so much about each other. You learn a lot about yourself. You learn about, kind of how wild our existence really is.
Mm-hmm. Now, what is your explanation of that inner dialogue? What do you think that is?
Again, I could get physiological. We know. I mean, the amount of pathways in our brain, they're not infinite, but they're in the billions and quadrillions of connections that are going on within our brain. And the brain is always running at some level. Areas are communicating with each other all the time. And so it would be easy to think that there are speech areas or speech association errors or areas, or maybe with my son's partner, maybe her visual cortices and visual interpretation areas are more active, whereas my definitive speech areas are more active, and they may be just going, and we may be picking up on them, our consciousness, whatever is registering this. So for each of us, maybe different areas are more active than others. I don't know. But I can, that's the fun thing about neurophysiology and the brain. You can make up a lot of stuff that can sound kind of plausible. And, it's nice when things support your hypothesis, but there's so much that we don't know. Even, there's a lot of studies out that are coming out right now that use a special type of MRI called functional MRI. And then there's something that looks at the tracts of the brain as well, called tractography. And they can show how different areas of your brain light up more when you're doing certain things, or thinking about certain things. But it's very gross. I mean, it's showing you hundreds of thousands or millions of neurons at a time. So it's not getting into the true nitty gritty.
Yeah.
So, you can just kind of speculate as opposed to say, yes, I know exactly what this inner voice is. Maybe it's my soul, and my soul is disconnected, and my soul is talking to the physiology. Who knows?
Huh. That would be cool too, is if we can record that dialogue.
Yeah.
Being able to capture that data while that dialogue is actually happening.
Well, I don't know if a couple papers came out recently that was kind of wild, that used EEG, special EEG monitoring of the brain waves, playing a Pink Floyd song. I think it was Comfortably Numb.
Yeah.
And then it had the person basically, I can't remember if they were thinking about it or replay, but anyway, they took their brain waves and kind of reverse engineered it into playing music, and it was able to reproduce comfortably numb. It wasn't precise. It sounded like it was underwater, but you could tell what it was just from their brainwave activity. So they are playing with stuff like that. And, where does that lead? Well, it leads to maybe being able to create, bioelectronic interfaces where somebody who's paralyzed, you may be able to think, put in electrodes and think and move robotics, for example. And so there's really cool stuff coming from that sort of thing.
Actually trying. Have you heard of, sounds similar to, you've heard Bire, Bire consciousness?
Not offhand, but it may be something I just don't know the name of because I'm terrible with remembering names and eponyms and that sort of thing.
Yeah, same here. I mean, there's I got to work with them every day, and half of them I don't even recognize. It's like, what does that mean again? But yeah, there's a program out there called Bire Consciousness, and Ed Edwards is one of the researchers in it. He was on the show sometime last year, and him and his partner, scientific partner, are working on. I guess what he does is he hooks up to all these different electrodes, and it's monitoring how he creates certain energy patterns within his brain, and it can alter certain states of reality out into the physical world. It's amazing. It's like,
I
whoa.
have heard of this. I haven't read about it extensively at all, but I know exactly who you're talking about and stuff. Yeah. I wish I could tell you more about it, but somebody has asked me about it before, and I, got a brief glimpse online and never got into it deeply.
Yeah, it stands for biointrinsic resonant energy. Uses the combined electromagnetic field of the heart and EEG brain studies. So
I can dig it.
I knew that would be right up your alley, man. Yes. So, as we're getting closer to the end of our show, what kind of what do you have as a takeaway? But actually, I gotta throw this out here first. Have you had a miracle case out there that is something that just really stumped you, like that wasn't supposed to happen, but it did?
Oh, you get plenty of that. I mean, again, one of the challenges of working on the nervous system is it's very delicate. It is very easily damaged. We hurt people. I mean, in the book, there's a fair amount of talk about how the fact that we as neurosurgeons, we hurt people, not intentionally, obviously, but through what we're trying to do, it isn't always going to go perfectly, and we hurt people, and we probably contribute to their deaths as well. I mean, maybe a plane that's already going down, if you will, but we're not contributing to it, and then we may make it go down quicker. So you have to bear that cross. You have to take that, and it happens with enough frequency that it's probably, we've studied neurosurgeons burnout and what drives their burnout, and one of the most common stressors cited is the idea of causing complications and death or major complications. So you have to deal with that. What's nice about it is a mysterious organ in many ways. And so once in a while, something unbelievably good happens, and you're like, oh my gosh, how in the world did we get away with this? How did this patient survive? It defies all logic. This patient should not be alive,
Yeah.
And yet they're there hugging us and thanking us. And as a old mentor of mine used to say, neurosurgery, sometimes you're winning when you think you're losing, and sometimes you're losing when you think you're winning. And it's much nicer when you're winning when you think you're thinking that you're losing. So those come up with some frequency for sure. And I'll tell you another one that's pretty wild. I used to do a lot of seizure surgery, that is to try to stop seizures that can't be controlled with medicines. and often in kids. And there's a type of seizures and a type of problem that occurs in some kids where basically a whole half of their brain is shot. It's seizing away, usually due to a developmental problem when they were in the womb. But the brain just continuously seizes, and it pollutes the other side of the brain and is harming the other side of the brain because of this. And we would do surgery where initially we used to just take out essentially half the brain. We modified that through the years to where rather than take out most of it, we would disconnect it. So a large portion of we would just disconnect from the rest of the brain. But one way or the other, you're basically stopping the function of essentially half the brain. And you do it when the kids are pretty young, and it so happens that the other side of the brain will take over a huge amount of the function, and the child ends up being able to use both sides of their bodies. And I several times after this operation that seems so grotesque and so nasty, 6, 9, 12 months later, the mom would come back with the child, hug me and cry, and it chokes me up to say it now, but say, you gave me my child back. And, you want to talk about miracles. I mean, how can anybody, come through that and not just be awestruck?
Yeah. You carry many blessings. I tell you what, you carry many blessings, and to be blessed to offer that gift to people and humanity, to be a lifesaver. And it's a gift.
Yeah, and I have to say that I really think there's so, again, in my field, there's so much terrible stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And there are so many people that the patient themselves, we can't fix, we can't help. But I always would tell our trainees, our residents, that, in those circumstances, in fact, all the circumstances we deal with, you're not just treating the patient, the rest of the family is also your patient. They're going to go through shock and grief, and it's just horrendous what they're suffering. So, treat the families. And if you can extend your humanity, you may not be doing anything with your surgery or your medicines, but your humanity can always do something. You can always give people humanity, dignity, grace, kindness, compassion. So if you can be giving that, you're always being a great doctor.
Absolutely. So to close the show, that seemed like a good takeaway. But to close the show, do you have anything as a takeaway for our audience today?
Yeah, I just go back to what we said before, that what we have, these lives that we have, that they can really seem so taxing at times, and people can drive us crazy, and things can drive us crazy, and the traffic can drive us crazy, and the line at the Starbucks can drive us crazy, and everything else. But recognize just how tenuous it all is, how fragile it all is. Take it in, love it, enjoy it, soak it in, love the people you're with, love your family, your friends, be kind to everybody, because there's no point in doing and being otherwise. It is just so easily taken away. Make the very most of it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Life is truly a precious thing, and we got to cherish it. Not to live your life in a bubble.
No, you can't do that.
Can't do that, but just I'd say kind of look. I don't know. It's recognize our own mortality. Is just recognize it, that tomorrow is not guaranteed.
Yeah, and as you say, cherish. Absolutely every second of it. I'll give you one other thing that we talk about a lot in our books, that I think, in medicine, we certainly do it, but I find that in every other industry, it seems like we all do it, is we spend our days often searching for bad things. Now, there's a reason for it. Like in medicine, I'm looking for what's going to go wrong next. So a patient may be recovering for surgery, and we could pat ourselves on the back and say, oh, okay, aren't we wonderful? We did this wonderful surgery. But really what we're looking at the patient thinking, what could go wrong? What could go wrong? What could go wrong? Because I want to be on top of it. I want to get there before it happens. And I think we do this, throughout life. But what that does, we talked about the physiology of our brains, but it trains our brains to be constantly looking for the downside, to be looking for the bad side, for looking for bad things. And one of the things we do in resilience training is we say, hey, for a few weeks, 2-3 weeks, write down 4, 5, 6 things that occur during the day that are good. We call it collecting uplifts or harvesting uplifts. Write a few things that happened today that put a smile on your face. Maybe somebody smiled at you or thanked you, or you heard a great song on the radio in the car today, or, something went well. And just write it down, scroll it down. Bring it home at night before you go to sleep, look at it and say, well, there were a few things today that went pretty well. This went well. This was nice. This was nice. This was nice. And what happens is if you do that routinely, if you force yourself to do it for 2 to 3 weeks, there's pretty good psychological evidence that you'll train your brain to do it for you. You don't need to force yourself anymore. Your brain just starts noticing the good things that are happening around you. And that makes for a much happier life, a much more fulfilling life. That, yes, I am cherishing it because I'm noticing good things.
Yeah. That's a perfect takeaway. That's a really good practice.
Good. We like it.
I'm going to try it.
It's worth it. Believe me.
Yeah. Wow. That's cool. Well, Gary, blessings, my friend. Thank you for being sharing with us your time and your life and your new book called Death's Pale Flag. And everybody out there, definitely check it out. Go to the bookstore, go online. It's on Amazon, I would assume too. Amazon.
Yep, it's on all the major
website.
Online sellers.
Yeah. Check it out. Death's Pale Flag by Gary Simonds. Gary, thank you very much. You have a wonderful, wonderful rest of the day.
I can't thank you enough. It's a delightful conversation. I have really enjoyed it. Now you gotta think about that inner voice of yours now.
Yes.
Get back to me. And
you got me intrigued.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, I'm gonna think about that now. Yep. And everybody out there too, everybody who's watching and listening, gonna be watching and listening to the show, try it. See if there was something, aside from, to end a little bit, is this is one of the exercises I had to do, was to listen to yourself. Stop thinking. And then what's the first thing that happens? You start contemplating on trying to stop thinking, and you keep telling yourself, what am I going to think about? It's you start to hear that dialogue because you can't stop thinking.
But not everybody.
Exactly.
Again, and mine is a clear-cut voice, and yours may not be. It's very interesting.
Yes, very intriguing. Once again, Gary, thank you very much. Thank you for being on the show. And if you have any new material, new books coming out, let us know. We'll get you back on. And yeah.
Well, definitely. And cool. I can't thank you enough.
You are very, very welcome, and thank you. Thank you, everybody, for watching Conscious Radio Networks. Till then, we will see you next week.